Hey there, as we look at the review for the Chapter 4 test, just want to go over a few things. Obviously, most of the stuff we have talked about, all this stuff we've talked about, either before school stopped or since we've been out with the e-learning week. So just want to do a little quick review on this, and then you have practice problems that are in the assignment for today, and that assignment is due, so make sure you do get that turned in. And so for Unit 4, remember we did the following sections, and you'll see them over here on the right. 4.1 on operations with polynomials, 4.3 on dividing polynomials, 4.4 on graphing polynomial functions, 4.5 on analyzing graphs of polynomial functions, 4.6 on solving polynomial equations, and 4.9 on roots and zeros. Again, anything from Section 2, doing long division of Section 3, anything from Section 7 or 8 will not be a part of this unit test tomorrow. So just keep that in mind as you're reviewing for this test. And so I want to give you just a few reminders. Again, obviously you can go back to the notes, and obviously all of those are here as I go through all these lessons. Remember, all the notes are still available. All the videos that we've done are still available as well. And so with that, let's look at the following. So Section 1, remember we talked about operations with polynomials. And remember that to add or subtract, remember that your terms must be what? Well, they gotta be like terms, right? So I can only add x squareds with x squareds, right? I can add x cubes with x cubes, but I cannot combine x squareds with x cubes. And remember to multiply polynomials, I recommend that you use the box. Remember we talked about the box method of multiplying, let's say for example, x squared plus 2x minus 9 times x plus 3, and being able to multiply that all the way out. X cubed plus 2x squared minus 9x, that's minus 27, plus 6x, and a positive 3x squared. And remember, you'll combine those like terms together. So x cubed plus 5x squared minus 3x minus 27. So just keep that in mind as we look at those problems, okay? So in 4.3, we talked about dividing polynomials. Remember, you do not need to do long division, but remember your power rules, right? As we simplify polynomials. Synthetic division, remember that's the one that looks like this. And remember, so like if I had, let's say this problem, right? So I'd have the 1, the 5, the negative 3, and the negative 27. And let's say I'm dividing by x plus 3. Remember, I'm going to put a negative 3 here because remember, I'm going to solve for x equals 0. Or, well, x plus 3 is equal to 0. And remember, we'll drop that 1, give us negative 3. This gives us 2. This gives us negative 6. That's negative 9, which is positive 27, which gives us 0. And so it's x squared plus 2x minus 9. Look, that comes back out to that piece, right? That's supposed to, because that's the quotient of doing this divided by that, right? So again, we see the relationship here between multiplication and division with those two problems. Don't forget that if you have any missing terms, you need a 0 in for the space that is missing. Don't just put the coefficients that you see together. So as we pick it up into sections 4.4 and 4.5, remember we talked about graphing and analyzing polynomials. Remember, if it's an odd degree, what's that end behavior going to look like? Remember they'll go in opposite directions. And if it's an even degree, remember that it's going to go in the same direction, right? And I'm moving my arms like you can see me moving, but I don't have my camera on. So remember that odd looks something like this, right? Because it's going to curve up and through. And again, we could have more than a couple of humps in here, but the key is the end behavior. One end's going down, one end's going up. And think about that leading coefficient, right? What if that leading coefficient were negative? What's going to happen to this graph? Remember, that's going to switch our direction, right? Okay, and so remember with even, those end behaviors are going to be the same. They're both going to be up or they're both going to be down. And remember that leading coefficient, again, being negative is going to do what? So how can we find the y-intercept in these polynomials? Well, remember that the y-intercept is where what value is 0? The x, right? So remember that would be the order pair 0, comma y. Well, if I plug in 0 for all the x's, the only number left is the constant, and so our constant is the y-intercept. And remember how to find relative maxes and mins. Remember that we could do that by a table. We could do that by looking at our graphs to find those individual points. So in 4.6, we were solving polynomial equations. And remember that your first huge step is to factor for the GCF first. Make sure you get that GCF out of the way before you try to use any other factoring method. Remember your different factoring methods, and remember, see the table in the notes in 4.6. So remember, like difference of squares, difference of cubes, sum of cubes, perfect square trinomials, all those different ones that we could use to factor. But remember, before you start factoring, your equation needs to be set equal to 0. Okay, so that was 4.6. And then finally in 4.9, we talked about the roots and zeros. We talked about the fundamental theorem from algebra. Remember, how many zeros will there be based on the degree of a function? Well, if I have an 8th degree function, how many zeros will it have? Well, if it was an 8th degree function, it will have 8 zeros. Now, those could be real, those could be complex, those could be imaginary. And remember, based on the other two parts we're going to talk about here is where those zeros happen. And so remember the Descartes rule of sign. Remember that tells us that if I do f of x and I figure out all the different sign changes, that we're going to get that many positive real zeros or reducing down by an even number. So again, if I were to have 3 sign changes on just regular f of x, then that would lead me to having either 3 positive real zeros or 1 positive real zero. And remember f of negative x, remember that negative x is only going to affect the odd powers because that's where it's going to bring that negative out. Remember the even powers will stay with the positive x inside, and so it doesn't change the sign of the coefficient. And so remember, we'll look at the same for the negatives, and that will give us the negative real zeros, the possible number of them. Again, it could be lower than the number that comes out. And so remember, with complex conjugates, and we also talked about irrational roots, that you need a conjugate, right? And so if you have 2 plus 3i, what other root will you also have? Well, remember that's going to be 2 minus 3i, right? Or if I have the root 5 minus the square root of 7, what other root will I also have? 5 plus the square root of 7. And remember how we're going to multiply those out to get the function of least degree. And so that is Unit 4 in a nutshell. And I'm sorry that I'm yawning here, but you're just going to deal with it. So if you have questions, again, use today. Reach out, get those questions answered before you take this test tomorrow. Again, I'm available if you need me for Zoom. The word of the day is review. And so I hope y'all have a good day. Again, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.